Hello, hello, everyone. My name is Daniel, and today I am super excited to have my friend Phil Krim, co-founder and CEO of Casper, on Founders Live today. Phil, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Excited to have you. Thank you for calling in from New York, and excited to catch up with you. I was trying to do some calendaring, and I think the last time we had at least a chat like this was 2017. Is right after you finished your closed your round with Target. I think that was 2017, right? And a lot has changed since then, and I'm just super excited to catch up with you. And maybe we can just start. But what are you most excited about for the next few months in your life, whether it's work or personal or everything? What's going on with you?
Well, it's a good question. We're here in New York City for a checkup because my wife is now 9 months pregnant, so we're expecting our second baby any day now, and so really excited about that. And so that'll be a good change in life. And other than that, just working and staying busy, and looking forward to the spring weather.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, hope it all goes off without a hitch, and congratulations again formally to you on that
Thank you.
exciting number two. And by the way, as we're going, for anyone watching, please drop in your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to get to them as we're going along. We'll monitor the chat as we go on. But even though you and I have spoken many times before, a lot of people are probably hearing from you for the first time watching here. So I thought a fun place to start would just be kind of recapping the story of Casper and where it all began, and really the your experience in the world of mattresses and sleep predates Casper, and maybe you can talk a bit about that, and then the kind of founding story of how it all came to be.
Sure. Yeah. So this is an industry and category I've been around for a long time, really since college, and have spent my entire career around e-commerce, digital marketing, really since the early 2000s, and was exposed to the mattress industry as one of several categories that we operated with my first company that I started when I was in school at the University of Texas. And then, ultimately, my co-founders for Casper back in 2013. We launched the business in 2014, and the five of us had this idea of building the world's first sleep brand, and that's something that we're still excited about. We feel like we're in early days with, and couldn't imagine that Casper would grow as quickly as it has over the last, not even 7 years. So next month will be our 7-year birthday. And
Wow.
last year we did $500 million in sales, so it's kind of crazy. But we still feel like we're early days of building the world's first sleep brand. We want to be known as having the best sleep products out there for all
Mhm.
your sleep needs. So we started with a mattress, and that part of our business is going really well. But it's we're tiny market share relative to the size of the enormity of the overall mattress industry. Now we have other
Mhm.
parts of our business that are going really well as well, like our pillow business, our bedding business, our glow light business. And so we really think Casper is the brand and the platform that can scale to become the top of mind brand when consumers think about getting a better night of sleep. And so we're just one foot in front of another when thinking about that opportunity, and continuing to execute around the idea that the five of us, myself and four co-founders, had back when
Yeah.
we started working on the business in 2013.
And I think that's really fascinating on the fact that you started this business with four others, because whether you talk, most of my other friends have started the business with one or two co-founders or on their own. If you always talk to investors or the YCs of the world, it's like, yeah, three co-founders or less. The team here at Clearbank is five co-founders, so they're not foreign to this. But how did you end up choosing to work with four other people? Like that's a lot of people to come together on a very specific idea that at the time is probably quite crazy, given how we used to buy mattresses back in 2013.
Yeah, it's interesting when people hear stories. The stories are told in very linear, deliberate fashions, and like everything had a reason. In reality, life often happens in more random happenstance ways, and I would put Casper as one of those. Like, I was sitting next to three of the four other co-founders in an office space. We just became friends. We weren't deliberate in like, okay, let's go stop this and go work on Casper, and you know have a business plan and things like that. Like this was an idea that evolved just because we were friends and we're talking a lot about sleep and talking about Fitbits and Jawbones at the time were just coming into the market, so we were tracking our sleep, and it just led to us all identifying and commiserating over the problem that is and was buying a mattress, and living in New York City, and at the time going into a Sleepy's just was the last thing any of us as consumers wanted to do. And
Yeah.
so, we probably asked what turns out to be a very dangerous question, which is just, why is it such a terrible experience? And that ended up being a problem we figured we had to solve, and that's what we continue to work on today.
And so you come up with this concept, kind of working with your friends on that. I'm curious, before you landed on Casper, were there any other ideas that were in competition with this one? What did it beat out?
Well, so I was working on my previous business, which was called Vocalize Mobile. We were selling mobile leads generated in a click-to-call fashion to local businesses, and that was going okay. It was a tough business. It was one that just always felt like a grind. It wasn't a business I was super passionate about. Gabe, Luke, and Neil were working on their previous business, which was a business helping bloggers and content generators monetize their audience by selling goods.
Hmm.
And so again, that was just a tough business that was interesting, but it was one of those, like, as we started just talking about sleep, we all realized we had a personal connection to it through different ways. I had trouble sleeping because I had a bad back. Neil's dad's a sleep doctor. He was a pulmonologist. So we all came to the idea of Casper differently. And so it just ended up being a really organic kind of path to getting excited about an idea and getting passionate about an idea, so much so that we couldn't imagine working on anything else. And that's when we stopped working on what we were working on and focused on Casper.
Very cool. And kind of jumping ahead to when the business launched. This is probably one of my, well, actually before that, I think it's also a fun story you mentioned of like everyone having sleep problems. The name Casper comes from someone else who was having trouble sleeping. Can you tell us more about the origins of that and how you landed on Casper as the name?
Yes, Casper was a self-inflicted sleep issue, where my co-founder Luke, he had a roommate at the time that was a 6'6" German fellow sleeping on a twin mattress, and so he was uncomfortable and complaining about that. And we ended up naming the company after him. We gave him a bigger bed once we got production going, so he won, and we got a great name, and so I think it was a true win-win.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So the company goes live, and I think it's both a blessing and kind of the most stressful thing I could ever imagine. Is in that, I think it was in the first month, from what we talked about last time, you hit your 12-month plan in like 2 months. So naturally, you didn't plan for that. And so I've two questions. The first one being, what do you think you did leading up to that generated that outcome? Because clearly you forecasted something completely different. And so what do you think changed in actuality when you hit go? And what were some of those underlying elements of such a successful launch?
Yeah, we spent a bunch of time worrying about launch, thinking about launch. We studied what Harry's had done. They had launched before us, and they had worked on their launch really successfully. We'd studied how Warby Parker launched and some other DTC brands. And so we thought we had a good plan, but then we also said, how many people are going to wake up and read about, a mattress at this time, which was our only product, and decide to just buy it that day or that week or that weekend? So we had optimistic plans, or what we thought were optimistic plans, but we tried to balance that with, this took real cash to have some inventory, and we were doing everything we could to launch, but it takes time to build traction with companies. So we thought we had enough inventory on hand to last us, certainly weeks, and months was really the original plan. But then we launched, and we kept getting visibility from folks who were talking about what we were doing and who we had raised money from, and crazily enough, like those people ended up buying from us, and so elation quickly went to terror when we realized what we thought were a couple of months of inventory were sold out within days. And so we just had to start scrambling, apologizing a lot, and trying to get more inventory, and we're on ramping it.
Yeah. Do you remember what your first call was, or you see the first day sales data, right? And I imagine you see traffic. It's like, wow, this is crazier than I thought. Sales are crazier than I thought. At what point do you realize you have an issue?
Well, it's a good question. I like by the end of the first day, we sat down when things quieted down, and we're like, okay, this is interesting. And you're like, well, is this going to happen again on day 2 or day 3? And I don't think a day went by after we launched where we weren't generating sales, and where we weren't, in the early days, scrambling to figure out how we were going to handle it. So one of my co-founders, Neil, he had the brilliant idea to send our customers an aero bed that we ordered from Amazon, to say sorry and like, hope you're not sleeping on the floor. That worked until Amazon cut us off because Amazon thought we were reselling the aero beds. So it's just like, building any business, you're thrown things that you don't expect, and you try to deal with it the best you can. And it's tough, but that's what building a business is all about.
Yeah, you can imagine the thought of that buyer, whoever manages the aero beds at Amazon back then, what they must have thought of, like, what did I do today? Like, I'm selling out of all my aero beds, and who would have thought it was you guys driving that? And so, what I really was fascinated by Casper, in the early days, was that you really set the standard for branding and marketing, and what everyone knows today as the modern D2C brand. It was really you and a couple of other companies in that era that set that standard. And I thought at least one of the most iconic things I remember, having spent a lot of time in New York, traveling there for work, back then, was what you did with the Subway Takeover. And the reason why I want to bring that up is that I'm just curious, in those early days, how did you think about marketing and where to put your dollars? And like, it wouldn't have naturally occurred to me of like, hey, I'm just going to drop a bunch of money to put ads in the New York subway. That's not something a digitally native brand would do.
Yeah, of course, it sounds much more eloquent in hindsight. So in hindsight, I say, we tried to build communities, and one of the communities we were very focused on was New York City. It's where we had all lived. It's where we wanted to have a presence, and so we had thought about how to connect with New Yorkers. And what's the first thing you do really after you wake up is ride the subway to work, and the last thing you do before bed is ride the subway on the way home. That's certainly the life we were living at this time, and so we said, like, we could probably do better than the subway ads that were there at that time, which, to your point, they weren't brands. They were, direct response, terrible ads from the 90s or 80s. And, at the time, there was plenty of inventory, so we were able to get a great deal on it. And we put a promo code on it. And again, lo and behold, like, people called and said, hey, I saw your ad on the subway, I want to buy your product. And it actually turned out where it was a profitable ad buy. It generated profitable customer acquisition, and we're like, this is awesome. Like, so let's scale it. So it ended up becoming a big part of our, push to have a local presence and to really resonate with New Yorkers. And so we always thought about how to build communities. It's one of the reasons we were early with podcasts. We were fervent listeners of podcasts, and so we decided to advertise with those folks because we knew the brands that the hosts liked and endorsed. And we wanted to build communities around that through podcast hosts. And so that's kind of a theme that we talked about, is just where can we go to build resonance? And resonance often means someone endorsing you or someone that's, bringing you into the community. And how can we do that in, a natural, organic way, and just test and learn and iterate and scale?
And so, we talked about the subway and the podcast that did very well. And I'm curious, were there any experiments like that you tried that didn't work, that are memorable to you, that you thought at the moment, like, this is going to be for sure, it's going to do well, and it just ended up doing nothing?
Yeah, there were a bunch. I mean, like, along the subway advertising, we just kept trying to do bigger and bigger things, and then eventually we did like a station takeover during a peak holiday, and we thought that was going to be gangbusters. And it didn't perform well, and we were thinking about why. And it's like, New Yorkers don't ride the subway during the big holiday weekends. They're out of town. And so it was a lot of tourists, and things we did in Times Square didn't work as well. So it was learning, like, thinking about who our customer is first, trying to find and get in front of them. And we would always try a bunch of stuff. And honestly, like, I would push the team to think about the limits and really figure out the territory that worked and up until you can't work. And so that's just one of the reasons I think we grew really fast, is we always had this mentality of, like, scale it until it breaks. And that means, like, going fast and looking for ways to to really push, more and more chips on the table up until the fact that you find the limit, and then you just, you realize that, you learn, and you move on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, we'll eventually get to the point when at least last year you took the company public, but there's a lot of other work along the way. And so you kind of talked about the early scare of like, wow, I have no inventory for the next few months, so I have to buy beds on Amazon. Are there any other memorable, like, holy shit moments that popped up where you, in the moment, you're like, how the hell am I going to solve this? That you ended up, setting up the company for success later on?
I mean, there's always like the days and weeks that you lose sleep around. Fundraising is always you know spectacularly like horrifying, and you never know how it's going to come together until the very end. And again, it always looks like very orderly and very controlled, and in reality never is and never was. So those were always kind of pivotal moments for a young company. It's just how we raise capital. We're fortunate that we have some of the best investors and best partners around the table from the beginning. So we always had kind of good guidance and good feedback to me and to the team. So we felt very lucky there. Some of our early commercial partners, we felt, a ton of pressure to make sure they perform. Folks like Target, we really wanted to do well with them. So that was really stressful. We had a big partnership with American Airlines where a million things can and do go wrong, and you never know how a big company is going to handle it, but ended up being great, and they were great partners. So there's always moments around just making sure things go well, and things that could have a big impact on the business do as you expect.
Do you on fundraising? I think that's another fun conversation I know we had last time was on raising that first investment. Do you remember who was the first person you called or pitched the idea when you said, hey, okay, we're going to go build Casper? Or I don't know if it was even named at the time, but who was the first person you naturally called to see if they would invest in the business? Do you remember?
It wasn't to invest in the business. It was like more of a gut check, like, what are we missing on why this doesn't work? And the first person we really sat down and kind of pitched the idea to was Jeff Rader at Harry's. And we're like, what are we missing? Like, I'm sure this isn't a good idea, but tell us why. And he was like, no, I think that could work. And we're like, all right, that's kind of all we need. And then we heard that was a stupid idea from like 20, 30, 40 investors we pitched after that. And then fortunately, eventually we were introduced to Ben Lear, and Ben was like, yeah, that could probably work. And ended up being a much bigger advocate than that, and really had conviction around the idea, and was our first yes and our first big champion, and still sits on my board today and is an amazing partner. And once he said yes, we were able to get the round together. Before that, it was no's from dozens of people, and it was really painful.
Yeah, I'm surprised you stuck through it for 40 no's over and over and over again, but there's something clearly that stood out to you as this was like an idea worth pursuing rather.
Yeah, at the time we were funding the business on, my credit card and just trying to be scrappy with how we were doing everything. And it was an idea that we had conviction on, and we said, like, even if we can't raise outside money, like this is an idea that's worth being in existence. And so we're going to figure this out one way or the other. And maybe we don't go down the venture route, and maybe we just end up trying to do it ourselves, or, maybe we don't end up making, the investments in the business that we wanted to make around the website and the digital experience and a video launch and all that stuff. But there was a way we could get this to market, very little capital. And we felt enough personal kind of conviction internally that we were going to make it happen one way or the other.
Got it. And maybe another way to think through this as a fun thought experiment, if the funding environment is very different, the competition is very different, but as you envision starting, if you were to start Casper today, or you would be coaching someone today on how to do that on another industry, what do you think is different today for an entrepreneur trying to build a D2C business, and how would you encourage them to approach fundraising, testing, all the things that you had to live through 7 years ago, where the world is very different?
Yeah, like other innovation cycles, DTC continues to evolve and iterate, and I think I think DTC still has a long way to go when it comes to being applied to other industries and categories. And really excited to see how healthcare is being changed through a DTC lens, and insurance is being changed through a DTC lens. But the broad consumer landscape is very different than it was 7 years ago, and so you need an innovative angle, and you need to have something that is defensible and durable. Meaning, what is the edge, and that's what you need to talk about. Whether it's the team, or the product, or the go-to-market strategy, or the value proposition, something needs to be there to be really defensible. Um, and if you have that, then you'll have conviction around it. It needs to be in existence. You'll find people who will give you money. Like that's the great thing about the venture community, is it's just gotten more and more accessible. More and more people who want to back entrepreneurs who are have a vision, who are focused, who really want to scale their idea. And if you have that, then you'll be off to the races.
To jump now to a bit more contemporary, you took the company public last year, and I really just want to focus more on like how that felt for you, and what that was like. And my favorite way to ask this question is, if you were to give advice to yourself the day you go public and ring in the bell, what would you have coached Phil Krim back then as to what to expect and what to prepare for once the company goes from being a very successful private company to a very successful, but now out in the open, public company?
Well, what I didn't know, what no one would have known the day we went public, which was February 6th, was that we were weeks away from a pandemic hitting. So,
yeah.
We had the fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, timing of being really the first highly visible company to go public post WeWork. We were ready to go when WeWork blew up, and so we had to wait. And then we were the last kind of highly visible company to go public pre the pandemic. And so we just had this timing and path that ended up driving, Casper public in a time where there was a ton of negative sentiment, and then immediately no one cared, rightfully so, about, a young company doing what we're doing, because everyone started to focus on the pandemic. So, it's just hard, and you got to stay focused on the longer term picture, and on helping your team get through a really scary, volatile time. And it ended up being certainly the most challenging kind of time in my career, and so it's nothing you can really ever get prepared for, but it hopefully makes me better as a leader, better as an operator and executive, better as a founder. So we get through these times. And again, going back to, we had good supportive people around the table who always wanted to help us make the best decisions for the company. And so that continues to be how we operate. And we were able to get through it. And I think we're in a better position today because of it. So, the test of time will, I think, show that Casper's in a great position today, because we did go public, because we raised the capital, and because we're navigating the public markets.
And do you remember, obviously the world changed after that, but what was the conversation leading up to, filing the S1 and wanting to go public? Like, what made you decide on that route, or what gave you the confidence to do that versus continuing to stay private and just continuing to build the business? Or, there's always all the different options on the table. I'm curious what struck that conversation as, again, one of the first. In my head, I cohort this as like the founders of the D2C movement as we know it. You're the first one really to go to the table and say, hey, look, we're going to go public. We're going to make this a big deal, versus some of your peers in that era decide to stay private and, operate.
Yeah. And it comes down, in our case, to the founders and what we talked about in the earliest days when we were raising our Series A, which is that we decided, when we were raising our Series A, we were very lucky that we had a few different options. And we envisioned those options having different paths for the company. And where we got conviction was that we're going to go for it. We're going to take the big swings, and we're going to see if we can make something really big that, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, we're proud of because of the impact it had. It's why we raised, in part, why we raised from NEA, the biggest venture fund out there. It's why we raised from Tony Florence, who's been an amazing partner, who thinks really big and pushes you to think bigger. And that had to do then with our idea of like, let's get public, let's be a public company, and let's stand the test of time by doing that. And so we then operated like that was something that was, if at all possible, something that we were going to do, and we're going to do it in Casper fashion as fast as we possibly could. And so we knew it was a milestone, and we wanted to hit it. And I think, we're all personally very grateful that we were able to do it. Not many companies can. And, again, timing can always be better. But overall, we had conviction that it was something we wanted to run after quickly. And so we did it when we were, again, not even a 6-year-old business, and proud of the fact that we were able to do it. And now we just got to navigate it and figure out our path. And that's what we're doing.
So you've had this double challenge of running a public company, fully remote, or whatever degree of remote as the pandemic has kind of run its course. Is there anything, looking back, that you learned that is effective ways you found to engage your team and kind of still hold the morale together, given that you're not all in the same office, you're not in the same space, you have all these beautiful stores that you launched that have to go on and off depending on what the local regulation is. Is there, and for those who are listening and watching who are trying to figure that out even today, as here at Clearbank, we're trying to figure that out. We're fully remote now. I'm just curious if anything you saw that worked particularly well that others could learn from.
It's something we talked about in the early days. Like, there's no books on this. They don't teach you like Pandemic 101 in school. But there are principles of like, making sure you're communicating clearly, making sure you're over communicating, trying to make sure that everyone understands why you were making the decisions you're making, trying to make sure that everyone has the context on, the decision that you're communicating out to the team. The president of our company, Emily, is my chief commercial officer. She had a saying like, never waste a perfectly good crisis. And so how do we use it to drive clarity of vision, clarity of focus, and operate within that framework? And again, I think that's made us stronger as a company, stronger as leaders, stronger as a management team. And hopefully the Casper team and Casper family feel like we did our best and always had the best intentions of communicating clearly and early and effectively. And I know we didn't get it all right, and it was a really tough year from a bunch of different aspects, and there were cultural aspects and social aspects, and it was just a tough year for everyone. It continues to be a tough time, but we try to be an area where we think long term, where we try to build a good foundation for our employees, our customers, everyone within our ecosystem, by just being good operators and transparently showing our good intent by communicating clearly, and did the best we can, and continue to try to do better every day.
100%. Well, I mean, you're really working on a very noble and important cause, which is solving this problem of sleep, right? And that's where the mission of the company began. And I think now more than ever, you see a lot more people talking about, sleep and recovery as it relates to their mental health, as it relates to us being stuck at home all day. And I know I've personally lived through both versions of the pandemic, where either I'm working a ton and not sleeping a lot, and then the opposite of like, projects aren't hitting, and I'm trying to make something happen, but nothing's going, and I'm, just sleeping a lot because nothing else is working. And so I have nothing else to default to. And I've lived through both. And funny enough, the amount of hours I sleep, I find, don't necessarily always correlate with how energized I feel the next day. And it's almost, the more I sleep, sometimes it's because maybe I'm things are just not going well. And I just sleep as a default to try to, feel better about myself. And that doesn't work. Right. So I tell this whole story of just, I'm curious, you literally live day to day to think about this problem and solve this problem. And, after 7 years plus of focusing on the problem of sleep, what are some of the key takeaways or learnings on how we should think about managing our sleep and doing a better job at it, and, how important it is into our day-to-day livelihood?
It's funny. It's easy to say like a maxim of like, get more sleep or prioritize sleep. For some people, like for me, I've known my whole life that I needed a lot of sleep and that I'm not productive. Like I could never in college pull an all-nighter. Like I would just be dead, and like that would not be my best effort on a test. And I'm someone who's always needed a lot of sleep. But I have friends who could pull like back-to-back all-nighters and be totally fine, and still to this day only need 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And so sleep is just very personal. I think the good news is that people are just paying more attention to their sleep. And I think that's the key is, whether it's because you're wearing your Apple Watch or your Oura Ring or your Whoop Band, or you're reading about sleep, or you want to get a new mattress, or you're excited because you got a new pillow, like anything that has you thinking about sleep means you're going to optimize your life a little bit more towards that. And I think people realize that does generally help them feel better, and it does help them be more creative and be happier and think, be smarter. And I think there's just more and more research about how sleep is so critical. It became a key area of focus around the pandemic too, which is just in order to feel healthy and to fight off, God forbid you're sick, a great night of sleep is critical to that, and getting as much sleep as you can. And so I think sleep is just going to continue to take more and more mind share around the overall wellness equation. Like people know they should wake up and exercise, or exercise whenever, and people know they need to eat well. And more people realize that sleep is an ingredient that makes a difference to them. And if they realize, then that's great. They'll start to optimize around it.
And I'm also curious now is because there's a few kind of considerations here. The company started of just doing mattresses, and then you expanded to pillows and other types of accessories, and you continue to drive this evolution of the company from not a mattress and bedding company but to a sleep company. And can you share a bit more onto how you thought about new products you launch, and what was within your skill set to launch or not launch? I'd love to just get your thoughts on how you think about that at the business.
Yeah, so we think Casper is really the only brand out there that is truly a platform that can become a sleep destination and the top of mind brand for sleep. We know that that's not going to happen overnight. We know that's not going to happen if we only have a single product category. So we think about how do we develop multiple tentpole products and product categories for Casper that help people sleep better. Now, we started with a mattress, and that's always going to be a tentpole for us. But we have a lot of solutions to help people sleep better well beyond the mattress. Our glow light has been really popular, really successful. And it's a light that helps mimic the sun rising and the sun setting to help you fall asleep and wake up in a more natural fashion. Our weighted blankets are selling super well, especially during the holidays and especially during kind of high stress times. We've seen a great business there, and we're going to expand distribution around that product. Our pillow business has been amazing. Our pillow business grew over 35% last year. And we sell a ton of pillows because people realize that, a pillow is just as important as sleep as your mattress or as any other, item in your bedroom. So we're developing more of these tentpole products and expanding our footprint and expanding our, content around these on why it helps to get you the best night of sleep possible. And I think all of this will ultimately allow Casper to become the sleep brand over time. And we're really excited about where we are in that journey.
And so the other products to me are natural, logical leaps I can think of why, beds to pillows, pillows to weighted blanket, and so on. But the glow light fascinates me because that's like in some ways, it's a consumer electronic product. You have an app that communicates with it. It's a different supply chain. How did that end up? Like, what's the story of how that came to the top of the roadmap of the next thing to launch?
We study sleep all the time. We have a sleep lab that's in our office in San Francisco, which we call our Casper Labs office, where we're studying all this. And it turns out, obviously, I think that all senses make a difference to your sleep. So your environment, from what you smell to what you hear to what you see, all make a difference to your sleep quality. And when we studied all of them, we kind of said that light and the visual cues were actually much more important than people realize. And this goes back to kind of intrinsically on how we're wired, which is just, the sunset and sun rising used to be how people wake up and respond. And that triggers things in your body innately, which is, triggering melatonin to fall asleep and triggering your body to come out of REM sleep, et cetera. And there were no, elegant products out there that help you fall asleep through those visual cues. There were smart speakers that you could turn on that had some lighting features, but when we said, like, we just want a light that helps us sleep better, it didn't exist. And so that's what gave us conviction we needed to go figured that out. There are good white noise machines around the audio side of things. There are good diffusers around scent. There was really nothing that we saw that solved the light problem that we envisioned, and so we went out and built it.
Yeah. Yeah, the only solution I have is of all these random like hue lights or some equivalent that I program with some timer, and that's the best that I have. So and it's quite expensive to do it properly. So you guys launching this makes a lot of sense. And so as we're kind of wrapping up here in the last couple of minutes, I'm just curious now that the company is in full flight. It's a fully scaled. It's a public company. What are some of the we talked about product development, but thinking about just more tactically on marketing and growth, like how do you continue to maintain that pace of testing new channels and things like that while still recognizing that everyone's paying a lot more attention to the business, right? You don't have the air cover of being this private scrappy company that can afford to have some spectacular failures that no one will really know about because you're in your world it matters, but in your investors it matters, right. But in the scheme of things it matters less. How have you thought about translating that in the current environment?
Yeah, it's a good question. And that's one where, I give air cover to the team, which is just that we can't lose and frankly, the board says the same exact thing, which is we can't lose what makes Casper special. We can't lose the experimentation, the, trying new things, the, throwing things against the wall and seeing what sticks. And so we're still going to do it. We're still going to stay true to what made us successful in the first place. We know, definitionally some of that's going to fail, but that's okay. That just means we're pushing boundaries. That's what we have to do. And, even as a public company, it doesn't mean you have to explain everything you do. Overall, it means you have to get to where you say you're going. That's the important thing. And, I think we continue to do that. But along the way, the key, I think, for long-term success is staying true to who you are, staying true to your vision, staying true to your culture. And if you've thought about those in the right way and you define those in the right way, which I think we have, then over time it'll all work itself out. And again, it'll look like it was a very concerted, specific journey, but in reality, it's just a bunch of like try and learn, and keep putting one foot in front of the other, and that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. Maybe we can wrap up. There's a few questions I see in the chat. It's a bit off topic. Maybe we can jump there right now. For those who are watching, this is the fun part about doing it live. We can make it somewhat interactive. I think this came in when we were talking a little bit about fundraising. A question from Kristen. So she's asking, what are some great pitching tips for founders who are in front of potential investors for the first time? So maybe you can talk about, now, how you'd view it based on all the things you've learned. What would you, share with Kristen as some advice?
I think investors love, passion. They love making it personal, really understanding why you're going to go spend your life doing this and pursuing this. And I think good investors know how hard being an entrepreneur is and how it's a life of just getting punched in the face over and over again. And you have to have real conviction to do that. And, I think the more you can convey like why you're the right person to go solve this, why you're passionate about it, then the more your excitement will translate to the investors. And that's really, especially in early days, what folks are looking for. And that's what people get excited to back. So I think just the more authentic you can make it, the more personal and passionate you can make it. And, if it's something that you're excited about, people want to back you.
Yeah. One question, we were talking about sleep. So you now lived through this once and you're going to live through it again. I'm sure there's also lots of parents or new parents or pending parents, about to live through what you're about to go through in the next month or two. Any sleep tips for young parents, given that you're both a young parent and the world expert on sleep?
No, I wish I had a solve on that. I think I would love to hear from anyone who's trying to tackle that problem, because that's a big one. Other than my wife and I, we're both people who need our sleep, and so figuring out a way to divide and conquer and share in the fun times of having a newborn at home was key to our success. So. But no, I wish I had the answer for you.
Anything you're doing differently with your second versus your first, or thinking about doing differently in regards to at least managing your life and not being a complete sleep deprived zombie, as I know many of my friends are?
Well, no, I mean, just the advice that every single parent of two or more kids says is that you go from kind of split coverage to man defense. And so we have a 2-year-old who turned 2 last week who's just very acutely entering his terrible twos. And so I don't know how we'll flip a coin to see who gets who, but I know we're moving to a new defensive strategy here.
Like it seems like you have lots of momentous things happening in around the plus minus 30-day period. It's the Casper anniversary. Your first is turning 2. You're having your next one coming due in another month or so. So it's a exciting and crazy kind of April time period for you.
That's right. No, exciting times and definitely staying busy, but happy we got to catch up.
That's awesome, man. Well, last question for you, and I'm curious how this has changed now. So you have, two kids very soon. Casper's obviously doing very well. You have lots of projects going on with Tailwind. I didn't want to get into too much of that today, but what else is on your bucket list? Whether it's personal or private, that come to mind for you. What are you excited about in general to explore next or do next when, let's assume, the world restores to its old state?
Honestly, it's not even a question I've had time to think about. So I feel like I have a plate full right now of things that I actually enjoy a lot, that I'm learning a lot right now. And so I'm really just focused on what I have in front of me. I think Casper's in a really special kind of period in its life cycle. I think 2021 is going to be an amazing year for the company and really a breakout year for a bunch of reasons. And so I'm really excited about everything going on at Casper. And we talked about the personal side and pumped for that, and with all of that, I think I have my plate full, but I think I'm really excited for the next few months and quarters, and we'll just continue to stay heads down and charging ahead.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time. I always love chatting with you, and I still remember that first dinner we had. I think it was with Steve Sadoff, where it turned into the Philip Krim Casper dinner. So that was like 6 years ago.
I still stay in touch with Steve. He's awesome. So I really appreciate you guys connecting us.
That's awesome. But again, thank you for taking the time. I always love this. Thank you for revisiting our conversation from a few years ago. And I've just had such a pleasure following along in all your success, and can't wait to see what happens next. So for everyone watching,
as always,
thank you, Phil. I'll catch you soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
See you later.
Talk to you later, Daniel. Bye.
So for everyone else, just to let you know, thank you for tuning in. We have our conversation tomorrow with Heidi Zach, the founder and CEO, or co-founder and CEO of Third Love. And next week, we have a few more exciting guests coming through, which I'll tell you about later. Hope you have an amazing day.